Over the years, Oracle Utility has been a steadfast partner of not only your association, but of the electricity sector. Rodger Smith is the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Oracle. He's responsible for leading a worldwide team in sales, services, product development, R&D, industry strategy, and marketing for mission-critical applications and services designed for the utility industry. And by the way, Rodger's also a featured guest on episode 13 of my podcast on the future of electricity, the flux capacitor. It gives me great pleasure to be able to turn the mic over to Rodger. Over to you, Rodger.
Thank you, Francis, and I'm glad to be with you again this year. I was really looking forward to my trip to Canada this year, and obviously that's not to be, but perhaps with the advancements we're making in vaccines, we'll all be together during this event next year. But I'm delighted to be here today to talk about resilient transformation. It's been a difficult time for so many people around the globe this year. Energy and power companies clearly have been tested with new safety protocols, new customer service imperatives, regulatory changes, all while keeping the lights on during what we would consider unprecedented circumstances. I can't recall another time in my 40 years in this industry when the term resilient transformation was more relevant. All over the world, utility companies have proven just how agile and how resilient they can be when the world around them is basically turned upside down. Solution providers like us haven't been spared these challenges either. At Oracle, our teams are working from home, but we still have to build solutions for the industry. We still have to deliver them on time and on budget from home, and at the same time meet even more fast evolving needs of our customers. I'm proud of my team's enduring dedication to meet and exceed these expectations. I'm also very proud of Oracle as a whole. For those of you who don't know, we've been the leader in helping government agencies and medical communities better understand and combat the COVID virus by powering the vaccine trials around the world and tracking and analyzing patient community health data around the world. And by the way, we've done that at no cost to those governments. I'm confident that we'll emerge from this pandemic stronger than ever. At a recent EEI executive forum, one of the executives said, maybe at the end of this, we'll find that COVID wasn't just a setback for the industry, but more of a launching pad for our industry. And I think that could be true. I've seen this in industry leadership for many years. This industry always rises to meet the challenges before us, whether it's pandemics, whether it's severe weather, economic crisis, or new expectations from customers. And I've seen it in the way utilities leaders are calling on the digital transformation investments that they made recently to power their companies through these challenging times. Francis mentioned a few of those just now. Technology has the capability to be a great enabler. Without it, it's going to be very tough to meet the challenges of the future in this industry. So when the world throws you a curveball like a global pandemic, you transition to remote working, implement new safety protocols, pivot to meet your customers' changing financial needs without skipping a beat. That approach, fiercely committing to innovation that balances agility, cost, and reliability, is at the core of where we are today in our discussion, I think, around resilient transformation. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our very distinguished panel today. First, we have Ken Hartwick, is the President and CEO of Ontario Power Generation. Among several notable achievements in his tenure at OPG, Mr. Hartwick led OPG's expansion to the US through the acquisition of Eagle Creek Renewable Energy. Sophie Brochu is President and CEO of Hydro-Québec. Ms. Brochu has over 30 years of experience in the energy sector and is the first woman in Hydro-Québec's history to hold the President and CEO office on a permanent basis. And then we have Dave Hutchens, is the incoming President and CEO of Fortis Inc. Mr. Hutchens' career in the energy sector spans more than 25 years. Mr. Hutchens serves on the board of UNS Energy, Fortis BC, Fortis Alberta, and is a member of the Edison Electric Institute's board of directors. And then obviously today our moderator, who you all know, Francis Bradley. And Francis, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you for what I think is going to be a great panel discussion. Thank you very much.
And now, on to our panel. I have one really big question for each of you, and that is, how do you see your organization moving forward post-pandemic What opportunities exist and what may be some of the barriers to future success? And so, Dave, maybe we can start with you. As Fortis has operating companies, across Canada, in the United States, and in the Caribbean. So from your perspective, opportunities and barriers to future success.
Thanks, Francis, and thanks, Rodger, for that introduction. I do want to thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. As Rodger mentioned, I've got 25 years of experience in the utility industry, but that's all south of the border. So I know I'm a bit of a newbie up here in Canada. So really appreciate you reaching out and inviting me to be on this panel. Obviously, our CEO, Barry Perry, you all, I'm sure, know him very well, is retiring at the end of this year. Great champion of our company and of our industry. Big shoes to fill, that's for sure. But he had a tremendous career. 20 years at the company and 6 years as our CEO. And I got to tell you, I've spent the last 6 years as part of Fortis working with Barry, and I'm so honored to be taking the reins of the company after him, and such a great succession plan that they've had from all the way from going back to Stan Marshall to Barry Perry, and I'm really pleased to be part of it. I know and respect and value the very deep and strong Canadian roots that Fortis has, and just really looking forward to being up there in Canada more. I'm really looking forward to getting past this pandemic and getting to travel up to see our folks in Canada and get around to the rest of our subsidiaries. But that's a great question, Francis, and you laid out the big things that we're all talking about. When you think about opportunities on a going forward basis, this is the topic du jour, and I really think that when you look at our sector, and I'll say both the electric and the gas sector, I really see that those stars are aligning. We're starting to see a lot of things come together, particularly from a policy perspective. We're seeing convergence across North America, whether it's the Canadian Bill C-12 or whether it's the expectations of the new Biden administration in the United States, and understanding what his climate objectives are. Look, it's all obvious, right? Everybody's out there, and and we're all saying the same thing. We have to figure out how to get a cleaner energy supply, and setting that goal of 100% clean energy or net zero, or however you want to phrase it, by 2050. Canada's saying it, U.S. is saying it, provinces are saying it, states are saying it. Everybody's aligned with setting that goal. Now we just have to figure out how we all work together across our industries to figure out how to get there, most importantly, affordably and reliably. And you're also seeing the other stakeholders. I mean, I meet with stakeholders all the time, whether it's investors, employees, customers. Everybody else is pulling in that same direction. And then lastly, I think when you look at post-pandemic, every country, every state, everybody in the world, this isn't just a North American topic, is looking for ways to recover from the pandemic and recover from an economic standpoint. And a lot of that's going to have to do with stimulus and investments. But at the end of the day, what it really has to do is, how are we going to get jobs in the economy? And what better way to spend stimulus money or to focus post-pandemic than to look more towards a clean energy future, to use that money, use those efforts to advance the ball on that topic. So that to me, I think, is where we're really sitting well from an electricity and natural gas sector standpoint. And as far as barriers, it's just, I think it's teed up. It's for us to get out there and make sure that we're out there executing. I think the path is clear. We just have to make sure that we're doing it, again, focused on affordability and reliability and getting there as best we can.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. It really gives us a good kickoff. Sophie, let's turn to you for the same question, but from Hydro-Québec's perspective. Post-pandemic, opportunities, barriers to future success.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Delighted to be with all of you. I would start by echoing what was just said by my colleague from Fortis, so I won't repeat it. maybe add the color of having to do everything he just said in collaboration with one another. Today, the public finances are strained, the private finances are strained, and the aspirations of both the collectivity and the individuals are really high. So to the extent that we are conscious of how steep the slope in front of us is, because this is a steep slope. I mean, 2050 net zero carbon is a steep slope. So we will not be able to achieve it if we work individually for our own optimized crowd process. We need to pool our resources, to pool our technologies, to be able to tap into one another networks with our neighboring, with our neighbors, be it wherever you are on the planet. It is time not to be parochial. It is time to share the vision and to draw optimization circles that are broader than what used to be, which will require a regulatory vision and policies that will make it possible to do so. I think it is our collective responsibilities, and the ecosystem of yesterday is too small. The ecosystems that we need tomorrow need to be more ocean-like than pound-wide. And so I would echo everything that was just said, everything that we have to do. My color on it would be on the mental posture and the way to do it in order to make sure that we do it for the least cost possible.
Okay, terrific. Merci beaucoup, Sophie. And from Ontario Power Generation, Ken, let me turn it over to you to get your perspective.
Sure, and what I do, Francis, is just build on the comments that were just made. And really, I find that the environment we're in now is maybe more unpredictable and therefore more interesting. And I think we all go through our planning cycle when we look at opportunities and challenges. What's the pace of electrification? What are the environmentally friendly initiatives we have? What's customer growth, regulatory changes? That's the normal lens that we tend to look at everything. But I think the macro trends that have been mentioned so far, as far as the economic damage being done and how every country tries to recover, you mix that in with the social issues that now every company has to pay attention to. And these are racist type of topics. It is mental health impact on our employees, the family, the community. So you start to look at it as a company and the lens that you want to look at opportunities and challenges. And I think it's actually more complex now. And maybe it's highlighted by the pandemic, but it's not as straight a line as what it's normally been. So when we look at whether it's doing a major project initiative, advancing something, there's these other factors now that are a bigger part of the discussion versus what's the cost per kilowatt hour, what's the rate repair impact. These are all important, but they're no longer a complete way to look at opportunities and challenges. So I actually find that it's a more interesting discussion around the executive table. Now, some of it, I wish it wasn't as interesting. So it'd be great if we never had COVID and that wasn't there. But again, it's a very different conversation when you start to apply all of these lenses.
Okay, Ken, can you maybe just unpack that a little bit more? What the sort of lenses that you're being faced with, and then maybe we can touch on it with the other panelists as well. Because what does that expansion now look like in terms of the conversation?
Yeah, so if you go to something that's simple and complex as equity, diversity, and inclusion, it's hard to make a business investment decision without thinking about that. If you look at ESG, it's virtually impossible to make an investment decision without that now being a major driver. If you look to social responsibility, and I'd say the Canadian, broadly speaking, the Canadian energy companies, I think, are first class in the world as far as how we respect the environment, things we do. But at the same time, I think even if you're the best in the world, there is a lot of pressure to be even better. And so that's why I say these other factors now are coming into it. And I think some of it will help us drive innovation, will help us think differently, will help us do things that maybe would have taken us a little bit longer to do. And now I think there's these pressures brought to us ultimately by our customers, but the people that live in the provinces and the countries we live in, where they're insisting on that as part of our decision making versus what's the cost per kilowatt hour or for unit of gas to deliver a product. And that's not complete anymore.
Yeah. Maybe, Dave, if we could maybe pivot over to you on that question, because given that, you've got assets both in Canada and the US, has it been playing out differently in the US, the social change, the social pressures that you've been seeing south of the border? Does it play out differently than it does here in Canada?
No, Francis, not really. I think we see it through that same lens, no matter what side of the border you're on. And I think, frankly, probably we're seeing this consistently, across, most of the world. I mean, this is a topic that, I think transcends boundaries for sure. And I gotta thank Ken for bringing this up, because a lot of times we get focused on the what we do, right? I already had a list of, oh wait, I can't wait till they ask me about, list some of those opportunities, and it's all this. You're ready to read off that list of what you want to do, but this really brings us back to how you do it, right? I mean, this is all about how you get things done, and that's the ESG focus. It's the focus on sustainability for sure. I mean, that's the main topic here that we kind of were talking about. But the how, right? It's the how do you work with your people? How do you take into account how you get those things done? What does your company look like? What does it grow like? What is your focus on, making sure that you're removing barriers for your employees, that you're focused on giving opportunities, that you're really focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, that you have that core, those core values within your culture, so that you can be successful on a longer term basis. That's what that whole S is all about. How you're involved in the communities, how are you doing things that are taken into account all of those stakeholders. Affordability and reliability obviously, are kind of the hallmarks of our industry. But it's all of those rest of those pieces that you have to be paying attention to as well. And then governance, right? And we're an industry that we're used to compliance. We focus on safety from a people standpoint. We're very focused and I'll say diligent in the governance process. We treat that as the bedrock of our companies. And so when you look at that whole ESG story, that's the thing. It captures the how. It captures how we're going to go through the next 5, 10 years, 15 years out to 2050 to collaborate, which Sophie brought up, with our stakeholders and each other to make sure that we're getting the best end result that's sustainable in every sense of that word.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe we'll take a couple of minutes shortly. I'd like to drill down on that collaboration, particularly with respect to across the industry and across regions. But maybe just to you, Sophie, as well. I mean, we're in the middle of pretty significant social change. Diversity and inclusion issues are moving to the fore. How much is it going to change the future for Hydro-Québec and the business that you're running? We just need your mute.
Thank you. Sorry for that. I like to think about the journey we went through as an industry. You see, I would say 30 years ago, we served subscribers, right? Yep. All of us. We were running utilities. We had subscriber. We had one service. People would move, build a house, call us, I want to subscribe. We had subscribers. And gradually, this subscriber morphed into a customer. And then it morphed into a client because we all realized that we should be treating our subscribers and customers as clients. And then this client became a citizen. And this citizen is a taxpayer. And in some part of the world, a carbon taxpayer. And this carbon taxpayer is also a voter. So right now, we are serving a beautiful Russian doll, which comprise in a one human being, a level of complexity, a level of beauty that is unreached. So as we interact, every company in every industry should be talking about what we just talked about ESG, diversity, inclusion, and all that. But what does it mean specifically for a utility industry, for us, for example, in Canada? What is the reality at Hydro-Québec? The reality at Hydro-Québec is that the vast majority of our resources are up north. Mm-hmm. While the vast majority of the consumption is down south. And up north, we have our indigenous communities with which we have established 40 partnerships agreements over the past decades, with whom we are much better today than we used to be, but with whom we still need to build more bridges in order to be where we want to be and to go beyond what the law is requiring. So when people say there is a law in Quebec, for example, and say that we should have 19.4% of diversity within Hydro-Québec, I go almost, I don't care. We should not be driven by a law. We should be driven by the logical human being drivers. So if I walk on the street in Montreal, I see a reality. When I get into the head office, I should see exactly the same reality. And today I do not. It's much better than it used to be, but it's not exactly. So how do we go beyond the law, the requirements, what should be legally compliance-wise, which utilities are very good with, compliance, we have to do that, we'll comply, but how do we grow bigger in our purpose because of who we are and what we do? So every utility has its own circumstances. Within Hydro-Québec, we've done great strides over the last few years, notably with the crease. It is my hope, my will, my determination, and the determination of the 20,000 people at HQ, notably with the Indigenous community, to budge the needle, to go beyond what we are often, like everybody, we are project driven. Oh, we have a project, so let's sit down and let's hammer something around the project. Let's say there were no more projects. What would we be doing? And that's the question. What do we do when there is nothing at the end of it, commercially speaking? What do we do when there is nothing more to gain than the most beautiful thing of human relationships, infrastructures before cement infrastructures? And that, I think, is probably one thing that is very peculiar to our industry. And that's the reality in Quebec. And we need to get better, and we will.
Great. I wanted to follow up on the concept of collaboration, particularly amongst companies and across the industry. But
yeah.
But just to the point that you were making about using sort of thinking of a Russian doll to describe the evolving place of the customer, ratepayer, taxpayer partner, and so on. And I did see, Dave, I did see you smiling and nodding when she started saying that. Tell us how that resonated with you when she was saying that.
Yeah, that was a beautiful visual, because that's the same way we have to think about, our customers. They are constituents, they are voters, but at the end of the day, they're everything, right? I mean, and what I find most interesting about our industry is we get to serve every single solitary demographic there is on the planet, because we provide energy to all of them. There's no customer segmentation where we're going to say we're going to sell this, high-end product to only these people with certain credit ratings or whatever. We're there to serve every single person. And to me, that makes it probably, I can't think of another industry other than utilities like ourselves who do that, other than the governments that, that overlap our service territories. That's an alignment. And I think that's a social responsibility that no other industry bears like we do. And so I was loving the way that Sophie was putting that. It was all about looking at those, human relations, but understanding how it all fits into the bigger, broader picture of everything that we do. The stakeholders are, everybody. And that's the part that we, I think, really need to look at. And that's how we need to collaborate too. This isn't just about, from a collaboration standpoint, isn't just about between electric utilities or between utilities in general or between utilities and government. It's casting a wide net, because we're talking about us providing the lifeblood of the economy, right? I mean, that's what our energy provides. And without that, nothing else works. So we have to collaborate with everybody and every stakeholder. It's a much wider net than it used to be even just a few years ago. It's not just, oh, here's a couple customer groups, and our regulators and a couple interveners and our rate cases or whatever it might be. Now, thanks to social media, everybody is a stakeholder, and everyone does and should have a voice in how we meet this very exciting future of cleaner energy.
Great. Ken, maybe we can bring you in now, and on the beginning of the discussion here on collaboration, and OPG, APG sits in an interesting place in the North American electricity system. It sort of sits right in the center of it. It plays a critical role. Of course, it supplies the power to Ontario, but it's critical in the Northeast system as well. How's that going to change as we move to the 2030 targets, our 2050 targets? What's OPG? And I know you've got an announcement coming tomorrow, but I'm particularly interested in, what do you think OPG is going to look like in 2050?
Yeah, well, first of all, Francis, I'm glad it was you and not me that said Ontario sits right in the middle. So I always very sensitive to the rest of Canada that we're not seen as the center of the country. But it's picking up on the themes we've talked about when it comes to collaboration. That I think, and again, we're going to roll out tomorrow our climate change plan. So it'll be broadly put out tomorrow. But when you think about collaboration now, and you think about Canada, and you're starting to see this elsewhere in the world, but I think the conversation and the maturity that we operate together is really, really important and good, right? So it's no longer, can Ontario solve climate change for Canada? Can Quebec solve it for Canada? Can BC solve it for Canada? Virtually in every instance now, and I think Canada has always been criticized that we have a better north-south connection than we do east-west. But increasingly, what I'm seeing here is, us talking to Quebec about how it can supplement some of what Ontario needs to achieve certain objectives driven by climate. And same thing, I think, Manitoba with Saskatchewan. So you're starting to see this, I call it maturity and collaboration, expand itself across the energy sector, both gas as well as electricity, because I think virtually everyone now has said, yeah, we know what the common goal is, and that is to decarbonize not just our economy in our country, but virtually everywhere in the world needs to take steps in this. And it's hard to hold anyone to account elsewhere in the world if we aren't great or close to perfect at it ourselves as a country. So I think going back to your question on OPG specifically, I think what we'll roll out tomorrow will be, I call some of it very similar to others. So aggressive climate targets, aggressive goals that we want to try to achieve, both at OPG and for the province and for the parts in the US where we now operate. But that can only be done by effectively partnering and collaborating with our big utility partners that are all around us. I just don't think any one of us can solve this anymore. It has to be a very concerted effort. And I agree entirely with Sophia. Your comment was great in that the merging now between what we used to think of as a ratepayer, a taxpayer, to become a citizen, I think is exactly right. That by every citizen in the country, and I think we see this everywhere in the world now, they are insisting we collaborate towards this goal and objective. And it's something where we do some of it now, but we have to be far, far better at it, and how we utilize some of the technologies and other things that we might want to use at OPG.
So I mentioned the place OPG has. Hydro-Québec also has a pretty significant role in the Northeast as well. I mean, to a certain extent, Hydro-Québec almost acts as a battery for New England. How's that going to be evolving over time? When we kind of again look out to that 2050 future, the greater electrification, are our requirements going to be even greater here, or are we going to see more regional collaboration and integration?
Oh, I am a deep believer of that. I think we don't have the choice, and the beauty is that we have the possibilities. Not so long ago, and I would concur, we were like, Canada was like a patchwork, and most of it was looking down, north south. To me, it will now be circular. We just put out, MIT just put out a report on how the electricity should be transiting in our neck of the wood in the US, in the northeast of the continent, to be the most effective in getting into the energy transition that we need to succeed. And yes, Hydro-Québec has been selling, energy north to south for decades, and we will keep doing this. But the flow of electricity will come back, and as the US states and the US Northeast states, New England and New York and the rest, those people want to develop their own renewable energy sources. And that's fine. And this is precious. And our role at HQ is to support that goal and to tell them, look, we'll keep being there, flowing energy because you want it and you need it. And that's what New York has just announced, right? When Mr. Cuomo said we're post-pandemic, we need the infrastructures, we need to get to a low carbon as quick as possible. Let's build that infrastructure. So HQ could be saying, we're just going to flow power north-south. But what we want to be and what we're saying, and I really look forward for this pandemic to be over, because I want to invite as much people as possible down south to come up and look at the dams, just sit down there and look at it and say, those reservoirs cannot be used only for Quebecers. We have the responsibility to give access to the broader possible population to use us as a battery for their own ambitions south of the border or on our side of the border. So the role will change. The way we will collaborate will change. And I keep going back to this because I am convinced if we try to extract the last penny on each deal, this will not happen. We need to look at the horizon and say, okay, if we optimize for the good of a broader population, what is the answer? And this answer might be that Hydro-Québec will sell a little bit less electricity in that neck of the wood, stand by, provide a backup. And if it is, fine. That'll be fine. It will be the way, but we will be there with our backup come 10 years, 15 years down the road. If we try to protect everything we do and have all together, we will not serve the customers at the end of the day in the right fashion. So collaboration, absolutely. And I go beyond that. I go collaboration between the scientific in the US and the scientific at HQ, the research, the innovation. We're going to deploy a megawatt-hour battery very soon in the next few days. So how can we as a grid operator provide that insight to other grid operators and share that battery and share that innovation? So we're blessed, and I think everybody on the screen would agree with that. We are blessed with I don't know why we say that in English, le métier, with the trade that we have, and it comes with a responsibility, and that responsibility is way more complex. But it comes with drawing an optimization circle that is broader. And if you look down in the US recently, a few governors got out and said, we need to rethink the way we transit electricity because it's not working right now in this new world of energy transition. And let's keep in mind, we deregulated energy transmission when we were in overcapacity. It's so easy. It's so easy to deregulate when you have overcapacity. You don't need to build, and you like the ride, and the more the merrier, and that's fine. It was a good idea. I'm not saying we need more regulation. We just need to realize that today the capacity is tight. You cannot bring more natural gas into the U.S. Northeast, and the U.S. Northeast wants to be a net zero carbon very rapidly. So there is no miracle. You need to rethink the way it's being done. And so it's creativity, it's change. And when a young person gets an adult, your legs are suffering, right? It hurts. It will be hurting, but it will be good at the end of it. And as we go through it, there will be tremendous benefit. I'm convinced of that. But it will be a change in our psychic as utility executives. That's for sure. That's for sure. Anyway, fun time to be in the business.
Yeah. So Dave, maybe to turn it over to you on the question of growing pains and regulation. How does that going to play out? We've and a number of people, Sophie just mentioned it, but I think all three of you have mentioned regulation at one point. What's the future? Sometimes it feels like the weather. Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. We've been talking about the problems of regulation for a long time. How are we going to actually crack this nut and develop the regulatory framework that will serve us in the future?
Well, I think the alignment that you're seeing from a political standpoint, from stakeholder standpoint, investors, et cetera, that alignment is also being seen across regulators as well. And at the end of the day, if you have policy objectives, your regulators will have to become more nimble in order to reach those policy objectives. I truly think that as we look across the North America and the different regulatory jurisdictions that we have, they're all doing their bit in trying to get to that new regulatory regime that will allow us to get to the policy positions that they're pushing. At the end of the day, you have to have those two things match. Am I still on? I think I came off the main screen there. Can you tell if I'm still on the?
No, I'm assuming we're still rolling.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to pick up on from what Sophie said was related to optimization. And that really is, that's the key, because again, we have different markets, we have different jurisdictions. And the key to optimizing resources, whether it's hydro up in Quebec or nuclear in Ontario or solar down in Arizona or wind in the Midwest, you got to get the energy onto a bigger grid that can balance those systems better. And to me, what really needs to happen in order for us to get to a much cleaner, greener grid, we have to invest in that grid. We have to have those interconnections, in the markets. We have to have, energy that can come across the border, because we might be able to get, say, 10 times the value for the same kilowatt hour of energy that Hydro-Québec has, because we need it to regulate renewables down in the Northeast or whatever. If you don't have those interconnections, you can't optimize the resources. And that's going to be huge on a going forward basis, because it's not just about energy, right? It's about energy and ancillary services. And as you bring more renewables on your system and you add storage to help mitigate them, you need to have all of those things on the biggest, broadest grid that you can. So you not only flatten out the load, but you flatten out the variations in the resources. So to me, that's the key. That's the key linchpin to all these conversations around collaboration and optimization.
Right.
And I'm not just saying that, Francis. I'm not just saying that because we happen to own the largest independent transmission company in the United States, known as ITC. Good, I got my commercial in, thanks.
Right. Listen, we're starting to get some questions coming in from the audience, so why don't I touch on some of those? Ken, I'll ask the others as well, but let's start with you. Hydrogen, is it coming soon, and how important is it going to be for us?
So I think like everybody else, for the past 20 years, it's just around the corner. So I think this goes back to the micro or the macro comment I made a little bit earlier, that half the people I talk to say hydrogen, it'll be here in 20 years, but don't wait for it. The other half are more of the innovation and others that are looking at this, like Tesla, like other big non-traditional thinkers, will advance hydrogen. And if you think about it, how do we get to a truly impactful decarbonization of the energy system without it? And I think people are starting to realize, hydroelectric's part of the answer, solar's part of the answer, wind's part of the answer, nuclear's part of the answer, storage, these are all parts of the answer. But I actually am a bigger believer that there are enough people now, enough countries, enough companies looking at hydrogen that it happens. Now, it's not going to happen next month in a meaningful way, but does it happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years? If I had to bet, I would bet yes. And but like I say, half the people would take that bet against me, and I'm fine with that. But I just think now we've identified the enemy. The enemy is carbon, and that then drives innovation. And like I say, I think it's great when other companies, non-energy companies, are now focused on something like that, because it's more probable to happen.
Right. Sophie, what about Hydro-Québec? You're putting some bets on hydrogen, I believe.
Yes, I would say I am personally a believer, a lucid believer, and so is Hydro-Québec corporately. There is no doubt that given our starting point with low cost, green, renewable, 99% renewable, low cost electricity in Quebec, we believe that we have a path to a green hydrogen production. We're going to move in 2021, I think. And I agree with my colleague that when you see a broader group that only energy people thinking about it, I think it's great. Hydrogen is as many prospect, as you know. For me, there is one that is a couple that are particularly of interest. Of course, as a fuel to move in transportation, that's for sure. The other thing is for a producer of hydroelectricity able to produce hydrogen at various period of time when electricity is less needed and use the low-cost banked reservoir water to produce that hydrogen close to the production site is also very interesting perspective. But if you push the idea, and you know that already slowly being done in certain circumstances, but in 20 years from now, you will take CO2, you will capture it, you will put it with green hydrogen, you will mix the two, and it will be a perfectly, completely compatible natural gas that you will inject in the distribution networks. So for me, hydrogen has a lot of optionality. When I look at it from the Quebec perspective, everybody starts with their own starting point, but for us, there are many, many merits. And so we will be investing, knowing that we will make mistake, there will be misses, but the price at the end of it works it, and we will do it very, very prudently, but with determination, because we definitely see that hydrogen will be an important vector of the worldwide transition. And if there is a place, frankly, on Earth where you can take a look at hydrogen, Quebec is certainly one of them, that's for sure.
Right. One of the other questions that came in, it was specific, well, not entirely specific, but it's, should projects like Site C continue as it provides clean hydropower? I guess maybe I'd frame it this way. What's the future of large central projects, clean energy projects? Is there a future for these projects as we go forward, low carbon, no carbon, large central projects, or is the world increasingly going to be distributed? Who would like to take a first crack at that?
Well, I don't want to take
Francis,
my friend. You go ahead.
Okay, Ken, go ahead.
Sure, I'll start on that. You know, I think and Site C is beyond my purview, but you know, I think when it comes to large infrastructure projects in Canada, we've, I think, proven we can build them well, and we can build them poorly. So maybe a little bit of a barbell experience, which is never helpful. You know, I can just go to OPG's particular experience. You know, we're putting $12.8 billion into refurbishing a nuclear station, 4 units. First unit on time, on budget. Second unit, we're in the process now. We've defueled and should be done defueling today. It is going really, really well, but it is, I think it's incumbent on us as an industry to demonstrate these can be done well, which is why we'll start and have announced the new small modular nuclear builds. So it's, you know, I think it's like anything, big infrastructure projects. I don't care whether you're building a road or a rail, you know, mass transit system, or a power plant or a big hydro facility. It is, you know, success gives you the right to do things. And when you spend double what something costs, you know, that right tends to get taken away, and lots of very, you know, lots of questions that are perhaps not welcome, but well deserved happen. So, you know, it's on us as to whether or not they're relevant.
Okay. All right. One of the other questions that come in is what was your biggest surprise to come out of COVID-19 for your company? So as you've gone through the experience of the last 9 months, what was the thing that struck you as most surprising? Dave, can we start with you from a Fortis perspective?
Sure, I'll say one that immediately, and this wasn't just we've got 10 utilities across Fortis, and obviously we could see the pandemic arriving in our different jurisdictions in different phases, and so we had the ability to, you know, get best practices and learn for all 10 utilities based on the experience of the poor jurisdictions who basically got it first. And so I would say probably the biggest surprise was not that that's how we operated as a company, but that's how our industry operated. So we were sharing best practices, you know, whether it was, you know, CEA, EEI, you know, AGA, CGA, all the whole alphabet soup. We were all looking at this like this is a problem for us as an industry to figure out how to focus, because we at the end of the day have an essential service that absolutely positively has to keep going. And I was surprised at that level of collaboration and coordination outside of our own companies. And then as you drill down into each one of our subsidiaries, and this is I think just a commentary on the resiliency of the human spirit, right? Is how resilient people are, how flexible they are, how they immediately shifted to, you know, the focus of taking care of each other. To me was just incredibly uplifting. It was like when the chips are down, where are people going to end up? And our people, as did probably every other organization that's here, ended up making sure that they were not only taking care of the business, taking care of the company, providing the essential service, but taking care of each other. And the creativity, just mind-boggling. The things that we're doing now that we didn't do 9 months ago, and you sit there going, why didn't we do this? Well, did we not know we didn't need to travel to have this meeting?
Right. Sophie, you joined Hydro-Québec probably just as the pandemic was beginning. Any surprises for you as the company went through, well, at least the first two waves of COVID-19?
Yeah, well, let me give you another time, because everything that my colleague just said, I think resonates across the board. To me, was of the population to everything that our utilities, our public services deployed for them. You know, we're electricity provider. Across the world, there is a lot, I mean, it's embedded, it's all that electricity distribution, as everybody talks about that. And in a matter of days, the appreciation of the population, and I think it was true elsewhere, but I can testify about what I saw in Quebec when they saw the level of empathy that we had, when we said, we're not going to interrupt anybody. If you have issues paying, no stress. We'll take it in due time. In a few months, when everything settles down, we'll be there for you. How can we help you? And the reaction of the population was one of relief, saying, well, at least my electricity supply is there, it's reliable. Hydro-Québec is showed empathy. And actually, at one point of time, you know, we started to do some outbounding. Usually you take the inbound for the people who have issues, you know, and we just said publicly, just we'll talk back if you have issues. Lots of people kept paying their bills with no problems. But after a while, we called the people who did not show up and say, and at the beginning of the calls, they were like, so what's up? What are you? And they said, we just want checking. How are you doing? Can we do something? Would you like to start back? And some people didn't call us because they couldn't do the whole deal. But when we said, can you do $5 a month? Sure, I can do $5. And then just pumping back the water into the system, and the level of appreciation from the customers at HQ has never been higher, never. So I was pleasantly surprised of how fast the population actually realized deep down how precious the public service can be in those circumstances. And it is up to us to build on that and to keep that momentum where it is.
Ken, how about from an OPG perspective, as a nuclear operator, you know, I mean, sometimes it feels like all you do is practice and exercise and prepare. But from COVID-19, are there any things that you've already kind of taken on board as this is how you will prepare differently for the next crisis, or you know, or were you as prepared as you could be?
No, I don't think anyone was, and OPG was not as prepared as we could be. I think we were well prepared, because you're right, we do deal with nuclear stations, and that gives you a certain starting point to things. But to pick up on the earlier comments, one thing I really have to commend this industry is, and it's not a big surprise, it's just really great to see it in the course of something that is complex, is the willingness of us to share information with everybody was remarkable. Both, you know, individual interactions facilitated through the CEA. So it's one of those things where it's the right thing to share. How do we do things? What works at OPG, what works at Fortis, what works at Hydro-Québec. And that, again, it's not a surprise. It's just incredibly rewarding when you see how well it is done. I'd say on the negative side of the surprise is, and I mentioned this earlier in my comments, is that the mental health issues are going to be very impactful. You know, I think all of our companies probably see a lot more through employee assistance programs, activity. We see it in our communities. And that's something we're going to have to, again, going back to us being citizens and, you know, having citizens that are part of what we do as a business, going to have to do exactly what Sophia described, reaching out, because this impact is going to be long lasting and it's going to be complex because of the environment we're in. So I think when you sum that up, Francis, the one thing this industry is really good at is lessons learned. So how all of us are very self-critical. We'll take the, you know, the 10 things we didn't do as well, factor them into the next item that we do. But like I say, it's, you know, I really commend everybody that's listening today and people at the companies, because it was all about what do you do best for people. And there was no hint of we're competitors or anything else. It was, let's do the right thing. We should give everyone a pat on the back for that.
Excellent. That's great. Listen, I mean, I would love to spend the day chatting with the three of you. This has been a really terrific panel. Lots of interesting takeaways and lots of, I think, interesting imageries that help us sort of conceptualize some of the challenges. The biggest one is that Russian doll, and thinking of you know, all of the different aspects that the customer, ratepayer, citizen plays, and of course the fundamental challenge of at the end of the day, regardless of what is being faced by the sector, ensuring affordability, ensuring reliability for that customer, citizen, ratepayer, taxpayer. So thank you very much for taking the time. Ken, Dave, un gros merci, Sophie. Thank you for taking the time to join our very distinguished panel. And again, thank you to Oracle for your generous support of the Powering Partnership Summit and for this panel. And then, folks, we just need a minute or two. We're going to reset for the next session, and stand by. We will be right back with Dr. Avery Schenfeld. Thanks.